Welcome to the Q&A Cafe. We're here in Georgetown at the Georgetown Club, and we're very grateful to them for making this our home, and also for Georgetown Cupcake as our sponsor. And it's a snow day, so you may be watching this in the spring or the summer or the fall or the winter, but we're very grateful to the audience that came out today, and I'm very happy to have Howard Fineman here as our guest. His third time on the Q&A Cafe. You were a guest when we were at Nathan's, you were a guest when we were at the Ritz, and now here at the Georgetown Club.
I wouldn't miss it for the
We
world.
just have to keep doing this every whatever.
Well,
and
thanks for having me.
It's wonderful, and there's so much to discuss, but I want to start with the real news.
Okay.
And can you guess what that is?
Bryce Harper.
Bryce Harper. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. So what's your take on that, Howard?
Knowing Philadelphia, as I do.
Yeah, you're pretty, yeah, exactly.
My guess is that ultimately Bryce Harper will regret having decided to commit his life to Philadelphia.
Really? Even with all that money? I mean, do you think it's the money, or what do you think
it's all the money that's going to make the pressure on him pretty intense in a city where you produce or you're vilified.
Yeah.
And that's Philly. If he performs, great. But being a hero for 13 years in Philadelphia is going to be a tough road to hoe.
Do you think this is more Philadelphia's success or the Learners' failure?
Oh, no, I think from what I know from my friends on the Tony Kornheiser show, like David
The
Justice
experts,
and,
if there ever
and
were
Barry
any.
Svrluga, the Learners apparently put out a pretty good effort. I mean, they offered him $300 million over 10 years. But he apparently was determined to set the record and set it clearly. So he went where the most money was. Everybody seems to think that he would have preferred to go to have gone to Los Angeles and the star power of Los Angeles and so forth. But he took the money, and the Learners did what they could.
Yeah, but this contract, from what I've read, he's there. He's not. I mean, I know anything can happen in baseball, but it's quite a locked-in.
Well, yeah, he's locked in, and I think both sides may end up coming to regret that. I'm just saying. I wish him well. I love watching him. My son grew up fascinated by him and inspired by him as a baseball player. Right. So, good for him.
I think for all of us who are Nats fans, and really the first iteration of the team, he made us feel like we were really, up there. So.
Well, I think he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated when he was 16 years old.
Something like that.
And I just heard a statistic that every time he goes to bat, he will make, this is the estimate, he will make $44,000 per at bat over the next 13 years, which I was told is more than the median income of the average Philadelphian.
Yeah, well,
so every time he's at bat, they're going to be thinking, is he worth my year's salary?
And they won't hold back their opinions.
They won't hold back their opinion.
The Washington fans are rather well behaved.
Washington fans are rather well behaved. They're afraid of making a fool of themselves in public.
So how does
has high costs here in Washington?
How does Washington compensate for this? Does this mean they now have a ton of money to go spend on something?
Well, you're out of my wheelhouse now, but I would say yes. And look, I like baseball, so if this is good for baseball or not is the question. I think ultimately it is good for baseball because he's a bona fide star and he hits thrilling home runs and he plays hard. So it's good advertisement for the game.
No. Good luck, Bryce. We hardly knew ye, I guess.
So thank you for coming to this edition of Sports Center.
Oh, don't worry, we're changing gears
but it is
now.
It is the big topic. It is
the big topic.
It is a big topic, and we're in Washington, so get over it.
And we do need distractions,
right.
Don't we? Speaking of such, I went back, Howard, and was reading some of what you wrote in 2015 when Donald Trump came down the escalator. And if I read it correctly, you were among those who saw a path for him to win.
Yes, I always took him seriously, and I took him seriously both because of my reporting career, which included my first 5 years as a reporter in Kentucky, traveling the state from Pikeville to Paducah, and covering a lot of the people who became Trump voters. knowing New York and having covered him some in New York and seeing the way he dominated the media in New York, and sensing the general disgust that people had with Washington, with politics, with to use a high-flown phrase, the constitutional order. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that he had a shot. I didn't think that he was going to pull out Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. I thought he'd win Pennsylvania since that's my home state.
You didn't think he'd win the way he ended up winning?
He pulled to an inside straight, to use a poker term, to win the Electoral College. I didn't think that. I thought he'd narrowly lose in the end, but yes, as far as getting the Republican nomination, I always thought he was a serious contender, and I wrote that. Yeah.
And did you have to deal with a lot of blowback in those 2015, early 2016?
Well, no.
Do you remember
think
how
so.
people treated
No, I think as a political reporter, I was just covering the beat. I mean, I went to lots of Trump rallies, memorable ones in South Carolina and Iowa. Stick out in my mind, and I interviewed a lot of the voters there.
Yeah.
And they were looking for a voice of anger and an answer, and they saw Donald Trump as a rich, unsilenced and unsilenceable guy who was free to utter the politically incorrect or worse things on the minds of a lot of the American people, and he did it. He did it brilliantly. I think anybody who underestimates Donald Trump's intuitive ability to tell people what they want to hear is underestimating him, and frankly not being frank about the way American politics works. So no, I didn't get much blowback. At the time I was at the Huffington Post,
Right.
and I was editorial director, and then and so forth, and
Editor of the Planet, I
editor,
believe.
global internet, global poobah. But I also had 35 years at that point, 30 years of covering American politics,
Right.
and I've been everywhere in the country. And no, I think, Arianna Huffington, who was in charge at the time,
Yeah.
and decided that at first we would cover Donald Trump in the entertainment section only. And
Okay.
that was a statement, an editorial statement that, in retrospect was both true and justified, but also wrong.
Not serious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And then after that, we put at the bottom of every Huffington Post story what was like a tobacco warning from,
Yeah.
saying, don't smoke this or you'll die.
Yeah.
But we that lost its impact after a while, if it had any. I mean, the fact was
Because you have to do it seriously.
you have to do it seriously, and of course that's the great conundrum. You got to pay attention to Donald Trump, but when you pay attention to Donald Trump, some bad things can happen. We had no choice.
But you still have to handle them in a straight-ahead way.
You have to do it,
And let him.
Yeah, and I think in a way
Hang or
he's-
not hang himself,
Carol, I think in a way he's even a bigger story than we yet understand.
True. So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How do you feel about 2020 and Donald Trump?
How do I feel in what respect?
Do you see the same path? I mean, do you see the path for re-election?
Well, I think he's better known now. I think people understand more about who he is and where he came from and what he represents. I think obviously
For better or worse.
For better or worse. I think a lot of his actions in the past and his actions as president and his statements are gonna limit him. I don't know that they prevent him from getting reelected by any means, but I do think it's going to come down to those. If you look at, you got to look at it backwards from the Electoral College. And by the way, a lot of progressives now want to get rid of the Electoral College
That'll never happen.
because Hillary Clinton won by almost 3 million
Yeah.
popular votes, but lost in the Electoral College. And the key states are going to be, once again, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, and so forth. And the big debate among Democrats is how do you win those states back? Do you win them by going to the center and hoping to get Trump Democrats, for want of a better term, back in the Democratic fold? Or do you try to look to push turnout in the big cities of those states, whether it's Milwaukee or Detroit or Philadelphia or whatever? And that's going to be the big argument. That's really the essence of the argument tactically between the centrists and the progressives in the Democratic Party, and Trump may be able to exploit that.
His base has eroded a little, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And to what degree does that have an impact, do you think?
Well, he's operating on the theory that got him elected the first time around, which is to heck with trying to speak to everybody. Just speak passionately, emotionally, and in a volatile fashion to your people and make sure every one of those people turn out. Yeah. The problem he's going to have is he only won by about 85,000 votes in those 3 states. If he can peel away 30,000 or more in each of those states, it would have ended up the other way, and he's got to worry about that. But will he worry about that? I don't know. Somehow I doubt it. I think he's strong-minded. He knows what got him here, and I would be very surprised if he tries to do anything other than what he's done in the past to try to get reelected in 2020.
In the spring of 2016, you wrote 7 ways that how Trump could win. Could you write 7 ways that he could be reelected, do you think?
Well, let me mention a couple. First off, don't underestimate Donald Trump's willingness to further upset and undermine the way we run our system. He will rip up anything he can get his hands on. And I'm not sure what he'll attempt or what will happen between now and the fall of 2020.
What could he do? Give me an example of something he could rip up that could affect his reelection.
Well, he is at war and will continue to be at war with the special counsel, with the investigation, with what he calls fake news, and he will aggressively refuse to be bound by the rule of law. And one would hope that that would cost him votes. We'll see. We're at a perilous time in our country, and I'm somebody who believes firmly in the traditions and the power of the American system to overcome almost anything.
Yeah.
But Trump will test the limits of it, number one. The bigger factor is that with maybe 16 people running or more in the Democratic primary.
And we're going to get to them in a second.
With their individual differences and competitiveness and philosophical differences, Donald Trump's going to count on the Democratic Party to divide itself and leave him an opening. And
there's every possibility that might happen.
That has to do with the fake argument about capitalism versus socialism, and it is a fake argument. Yeah. We've had a mixed system in America really from the very beginning. We didn't call it socialism in the 18th century, in the early 19th century when the government was building roads everywhere and digging.
But it's always
digging
who
up
owns the high ground on the narrative.
Yeah, and that'll be Trump's narrative, right?
Yeah.
He's clearly going to run against AOC, Alexandria,
who is not even old
Ocasio-Cortez.
enough, right? Who is not even old enough to run for president yet.
I checked, and AOC, as I call her, and most people call her,
we all call
her, will be just old enough to be sworn in if she runs in 2024. But in the meantime,
so calm down, everybody.
Yeah, but in the meantime, she is defining the landscape of politics, and Donald Trump and his people think that that's just fine with them.
Yeah. Well, she is not on my list of candidates, but I do want to get to the list. Though she will be treated as if she's a candidate by many, but she is not a candidate, nor can she be a candidate. So I thought I would start with, the people who've announced, and I'm going to start with the people in the Senate.
This is going to take more than the lunch hour.
No, because some of them you're just going to bat away. Okay, I know that.
Right,
I think that you'll spend more time on the ones you consider, and I'm just going to read off some names, and you can grab the one you want to go for. Booker, Gabbard, Gillibrand, Klobuchar, Harris, Warren, Sanders.
Well, let's start with Bernie.
Bernie.
And I'm starting with Bernie because he has more money than anybody.
How'd that happen?
Well, Bernie Sanders built a grassroots movement of small donors for the most part. He had occasional high donor events, but pretty much he was a small donor guy. And he showed his muscle, at least in terms of money,
Yeah.
by raising, I think, $6 million on the first day that he announced his
just a
for
couple
office.
weeks ago, right?
And I do think that Bernie Sanders has, as the person who ran second to Hillary Clinton last time. I mean, in a way, this is a traditional pattern. Hillary lost with some help from other forces, as we know, but she lost. And Bernie was. I was at the convention in Philadelphia, and the Bernie people were very strong there. They were very persistent, and they were very well organized. And so he has the best organization left over from 2016. And he's got people all around the country. More important than the money in the organization is that philosophically, he set the tone for where the Democrats, for the most part, seem to be headed. Or at least he set the terms of the debate. Do we want Medicare for all? Do we want single-payer health care system? Do we want free college education? Do we want the whole? Do we want a Green New Deal? I mean, Bernie.
And these are the main points of his platform.
These are the main points of going to be the main points of contention within the Democratic Party as the debate goes forward. And Bernie Sanders, quirky though he may be, easily mimicked and made fun of as he sometimes is. He, not AOC, is the person who's going to stir the drink this time.
Is he a spoiler?
Well, I don't know that he can win the nomination. I think it's unlikely, but not impossible. And I think he's sort of an he's almost an asterisk in the discussion right now. I think that's probably a mistake. I know Bernie. As a matter of fact, I did one of the first interviews with him as he was beginning to gear up to run because I was at HuffPost and they wanted to reach the HuffPost audience. And I was impressed with his force, his vigor, his focus. This is a lifelong project for Bernie, he's got some clout. But he's 77 or 78 years old, and as vigorous as he is, there are all these new, exciting, and different characters who want to say a lot of what Bernie's saying, who may be a bigger,
but in a younger package,
who may be the end up being the standard bearer of the left wing.
In that group I mentioned, who else is getting money?
Well,
because money's traction, right?
Let's look at the list.
Okay, so I was Booker, Gabbard, Gillibrand, Klobuchar,
All right, let me look at some
Harris.
of these here.
You've got your own list?
No, I got the same list. I'm looking at the South Carolina Democratic presidential poll of last week.
Yeah.
Who's raising money? I think Kamala Harris is raising a fair amount of money. She's from California. She's got a lot of clout out there, and that California is the honeypot of financial campaign contributions.
And how similar or different is she to Bernie?
Oh, I think she's substantially different. Kamala Harris is portraying herself as somebody who hears the music of the people, but has a pragmatic sense based on her years as a prosecutor and her years in government. And that's a pretty potent combination. I would say that she's going to be attacked for some of that record, but getting attacked from the way far left may be a good thing for her, perhaps. So I would say that she's raised money and she's
a formidable contender.
Formidable. I think Elizabeth Warren is popular, but I don't.
Wobbling a little bit, isn't she?
I don't see the financial and I'm getting. I'm on everybody's email list and all the email lists of all the candidates.
Yeah.
I'm getting more donation appeals per minute from Elizabeth Warren than I am from most of the others. Michael Bloomberg I have on this list.
But he's down in my outliers.
But if it comes to money, then if we're going to analyze it based on money and who might get in, then Michael Bloomberg. I think I checked. I think he's worth about $70 billion.
Right, but money doesn't make people go to the polls. They've got to want to go vote for you.
That's right. That's
you
right.
know, and I
That's
think
right.
that. I mean, I'm here to talk to you about this, but I wonder to what I mean, because you know, John Delaney has money too, and Howard Schultz has money,
Right.
and
No,
you know,
that's not it. But you asked about who
Yeah.
had access, who had money, and the money is a
well, I mean the
it's an
money
initial fundraiser.
as a sign of interest
sign
from
of
voters.
popularity.
Yeah.
Well, Joe Biden is not in yet and has not
And so, what is
started
that going to
raising
mean?
money.
What is the Biden factor? Is he Hillary all over again? You know, the accusation about Hillary was, you know, that she sucked all the oxygen, and by the time it was all done, and you know, maybe if Joe had been a candidate 2 years ago, he may have beat Trump. So, I mean, and that's just talk.
Yeah.
But where does Joe Biden fit in all this?
Well, I
Assuming
taught a
by the
class-
time this airs, he's announced.
I've been teaching at the University of Pennsylvania at the Annenberg School, and Joe Biden has a relationship with Penn.
Yeah.
So I convinced him to come to my class last year. And it was off the record, and it was 22 kids in a room with Joe Biden. And he was fantastic. He inspired the kids. You saw everything there that makes Joe Biden appealing, both as a person and as a politician. But I had to wonder watching, and I don't like to say it because I like him personally, you have to wonder if the moment has passed. You just have to. And with so many other people getting in the race, on the one hand, you could argue that that gives him a better shot because he's so well known and so forth. I covered Joe Biden's previous 2 presidential campaigns, and while he has a gift with people, organizing a campaign has not been his strong suit. And now you have a generation or 2 generations of people below him who have grown up in a new political and media environment
Yeah.
and a new way of doing things.
Yeah.
And when Joe Biden said,
Which Bernie's more plugged into.
Bernie's much more plugged into, Joe Biden at one point said, I'm consulting with all of the most advanced people in social media to tell me how to manage and run, how to do this.
How to get a
That
Twitter
was-
account set
Yeah,
up?
that was not really, that was
I'm
not a,
kidding.
that was
No, I
not a
think he
great
knows
sign.
that. But let me ask you this: if the question is whether his moment's passed, can the Democrats afford to not? Can they afford to not find that out until after he's already in? I mean, isn't that a huge risk? Or are there people right now whispering in one ear or the other, Joe run or Joe don't run?
Oh yeah, I mean, his part of the problem that you have when you're somebody like Joe Biden is that you have, and part of the nice thing is that you have a lot of smart, nice, very experienced people around
Oh,
you,
excuse me.
and most of them have careers, long established careers of their own
Here.
in Washington. They're among the most effective denizens of this city politically. But a presidential campaign is a grassroots movement. And you need to have people who are willing to drop everything that they're doing, move to Iowa, go to New Hampshire, go to South Carolina, go to Nevada.
You look back at the winners and you see that over and over
That's
and over
what
again.
they do. And as high quality as Joe's advising is, those are not people who generally drop everything to go live in Iowa.
They want everybody else to do that.
They want every younger people to do
that, right.
And you know, if
And
Joe
we'll
has,
sit here in Washington
we'll sit
and
here in
guide.
Washington and be senior advisors. That rarely works.
Yeah, yeah. How important in the decision to run is the family's opinion? Do candidates generally listen to the family, or listen to the family and then still go ahead and do what they want to do?
I think generally the way they do it is say, how much will you hate me if I do this?
And if they say,
And if they say too much, then that can be a problem.
I wonder if there
But
is
I
such
think
a thing.
I think generally, not always, but generally the families are supportive of what the mom or the dad want to do, or the person wants to do.
Do you have any inside view on how Biden's family feels about this after all they've been through?
Well, the Biden family, as everybody knows, has been through a lot. Death of one son, marital difficulties, drugs, you name it. You know, it's been
And 8 years
yeah,
in it.
yeah. But I don't think, first of all, as a public matter, if Joe Biden is willing to go through that, he will be telling, in some respects, a story that is very gritty and very real, and one that people could sympathize with, because it's tough, and everybody's life is tough.
But
so I don't think so. The public discussion of it, I don't think would hurt him.
Yeah.
The question is the personal hurt, and I think for the most part, the people in the Biden family, for the most part, I think are behind him.
So when Biden, if and when Biden jumps in, and right now the speculation is that he will, he'll be a front runner right away also, right?
He will be a front runner.
A front runner. I'm not saying the front runner. A front runner.
But there'll be other people wanting to say, yeah, well, I can unite the whole party. I mean, Joe Biden's big claim will be, I can unite the party in those states like Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and so forth. I can appeal both to the fallen away Trump Democrats and to the big city Democrats, the inner city Democrats. That's going to be his argument. That's going to be his pitch. That I alone, to paraphrase Donald Trump, I alone can do this.
Yeah.
But I think there are going to be other people trying, and one of them is probably going to be Beto O'Rourke.
That's finally brought the mean age down a little bit.
Yeah, he's a young-looking 47.
Right.
And one person.
Well, when Biden and Bernie are, when the other Bs are up here in their 70s, 47 seems.
Biden, Bernie, and Bloomberg, if he were to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Beto has the fact that the advantage that he's from Texas, that he can argue that he can go talk to everybody because he's kind of a clean slate in many respects. One Iowa organizer said that if Beto gets in it, he will run a aura. This was the phrase the guy in Iowa used, an aura-driven campaign. So what exactly an aura-driven campaign
Yeah, well,
is,
I mean,
don't know,
there's a lot of romance about it right now, but I don't know that there's
Beto,
much substance.
went around showing everybody his decision-making process on Instagram.
Yeah.
Even showed us his dental appointment.
Yes.
From the inside. That was a new American campaigning for
I don't
sure.
even know that millennials are crying out for that,
No,
though.
I think that was, as my daughter would say, too much TMI,
Yeah,
too much
TMI,
information.
absolutely. Well, let's say that Bernie and Biden are the front runners, like, in the near term. So you've got two white guys in their 70s. How do they go forward as a viable ticket? Let's say either one of them kind of maintains the lead. Who do they align themselves with that makes the Democrats represent what you feel the Democrats want to be?
Well,
and it's probably not a bunch of old white men.
Yeah, I think my answer as an old white man is that.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. They're going to have it. I'm ready for it. They're going to have a tough time because, well, first of all, look at the list.
Yeah, I'm asking who here. I mean,
well, we got Kamala Harris, we got Cory Booker, we got Elizabeth Warren, we've got Amy Klobuchar, we've got Julian Castro, we've got Pete Buttigieg, the first openly gay public official to run.
he is much like AOC, a very strong personality.
He's an impressive guy.
When you hear him, it's like, oh.
I've interviewed him one-on-one.
Yeah.
And he's got the credentials.
Yeah.
Life credentials, that is.
Yeah. And he's got an argument for why America could run the country.
Meaning Rhodes Scholar, meaning tours in Afghanistan, I believe in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
He's a war veteran, a Rhodes Scholar, a successful mayor, a guy who's utterly unafraid and matter of fact about his gayness and the fact that he has a male partner. And so
It's
on.
just,
And so generationally and culturally, both Bernie and Biden, to name two,
right.
are on the wrong side of the ferment and the energy in the Democratic Party. They just are. All you have to do to see where the energy is in the Democratic Party is to look in the House, the Democratic majority in the House. Now that's really interesting because even though AOC and others of her ilk have gotten all the publicity, most of the new members elected on the Democratic side came from purple swing districts where being like and saying what AOC says is not such good politics.
Right.
But they also happen to be, for the most part, younger people. There are a lot of women who are, quote, centrists, unquote. All the
Right.
women aren't, where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is. So, but yeah, the bottom line is, I think white males,
Well,
on the
and
Democratic side, older white males have had their day.
And older white males having another white male as their running mate seems to be not necessarily the way to go. I mean,
Possibly.
It's-
I mean, possibly because of the way things have shaken out in our electoral map and in our system. You're not going to ever win West Virginia, if you're a Democrat. You're not going to win it.
so you just have to
So
accept
the
that.
notion that you need a Southern moderate of some kind to try to pick off some of those Southern states is probably old think.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how Bill Clinton won.
Yeah.
But when Bill
But
Clinton,
that's last century.
When Bill Clinton left the Democratic Convention, he got in a bus with Al Gore and went along the borderline of the North and South because he was appealing to moderate Southerners with Al Gore as his running mate and being from Arkansas himself. That's not true anymore. And if you look at who was elected president by the Democrats in recent decades, first you had Jimmy Carter, a moderate from the South, then you had Bill Clinton, a moderate from the South. Then you had Barack Obama, who changed the equation to some extent, although he also won Virginia and North Carolina. But basically, that's over with. And I would guess that the Democrats are going to end up with somebody to whom the word new can be firmly attached. And that would be a woman again. It
Yeah.
could be two women on the ticket.
Yeah.
It could be an African American
yeah.
and a woman on the
Or
ticket.
an
It could be
African American
Hispanic
who's a woman.
elected. It could be an openly gay person. It
Yeah.
could be
All these,
somebody from what the Democratic
they may
coalition
have to blow it up a little bit
now
and
is.
reinvent
It's
it.
all getting blown up, Carol.
Does the Democratic candidate have to be able to run at Donald Trump and take him on, toe to toe, or ignore him? Because we know how Trump, we think we know how Trump will run based on how he ran before.
Well, the easy answer is obviously you have to do both. Donald Trump, the way Democrats can run against Donald Trump, I think, is to argue that he is the very flawed and arguably very corrupt representative of a way of doing things and a culture that can't be allowed to distort the destiny of America. In other words, you might argue that Donald Trump is kind of the end of something, an era of our politics. And to paint him as old and done will not only infuriate him, but is probably the truth. Because
Which is why it infuriates him.
Yes, any look at the demographics of the country will tell you that everything is changing, and Donald Trump, in certain respects, is a desperate backlash by a white America that is frightened, is frankly frightened. And he plays on that every minute. He plays on the fear. He plays on the resentment. He plays on the race consciousness all the time. And the way to do it, I think, would be not to just say you're a racist, but to say your way has now been exposed to be profoundly, irretrievably corrupt, and we have to move on. You're the very demonstration, sir, of why, for the good of America, we need to move on. Because your way lies fear and war and death.
Can Trump be weakened in any appreciable way by an end run from within the party? I mean, we know that Bill Weld's kind of positioning around the outside, and Larry Hogan is kind of. But is there any viable end run? We've heard that Flake maybe, but what do you think on that?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
I think what's happened to our politics is the parties are finished as big tents. We have gotten into more of a parliamentary style, ideologically driven, European style political party. We almost have a parliamentary system without the benefits of it at this point. Because the idea that the two parties were so mixed in terms of region, even race, don't forget Richard Nixon got something like 30% of the black vote in 1972. Race, region, ideology, and so on, that they were two kind of big houses that all kinds of different people could inhabit. But now you have ideology and identity politics, that is race, gender, and so forth, dividing us ever more sharply. And so ideological purity or allegiance to one person becomes a defining characteristic, not the broad tent, the big tent thing that we used to have. So that's the answer to the question about Trump. Trump personally and Trump politically knows exactly where the core of his party is. And I think he'll be able to successfully intimidate people.
Any comers.
Unless we get
the unforeseen.
Unless the unforeseen happens and,
happens.
Unless there's a whole other floor beneath.
Like at the White House.
What we know.
Right.
Which is possible.
Does he keep Pence?
Does he keep Pence? No, he may change. He'll torture him for sure.
No loyalty there, right?
No, because Donald Trump enjoys torturing people who are beholden to him. That's what he does.
Yeah. And the more beholden you are, the more he'll torture.
And I've been in Trump's. I've been up on the 20. I have not been with him in the Oval Office, but I was with him a number of times in his business headquarters on the 26th floor of the Trump Tower. And the way that would operate is Donald Trump's there. It's like the back of the Bada Bing. And he's got a bunch of guys, mostly guys, almost exclusively guys.
Once upon a time, Michael Cohen.
Around him, bowing down to him and trying to tell him whatever he wants to hear.
Yeah.
And he enjoys humiliating them based on their vulnerability. That's how he exerts authority. And he will, I'm sure, do the same to Mike Pence. I mean, Mike Pence is disposable. He may not be disposed of, but Trump will enjoy making his life miserable.
I'm going to change the subject, but I know and you can come back to politics anytime you want. But we only have a little bit of time left, and one of the things I did want to spend some time talking to you about is your synagogue, Tree of Life, in Pittsburgh, because it suffered a horrible event and a tragedy, and please tell us, how is the synagogue doing? How is the community doing? Do you go back often? Please share.
Well, nothing was more shocking to me as an American and as a Jewish American than the attack on the Tree of Life in my home neighborhood of Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh. Not only because my parents had taught Sunday school there, and my mom even had the misfortune of having to teach me in Sunday school, but the fact that I was bar mitzvahed there, the fact that I knew the rooms, the very rooms, the social hall, the sanctuary, the classrooms, where the attacker killed people.
Yeah, so chilling.
So within a couple hours of it happening, It was the one occasion I know in my career as a reporter and writer, which now spans a long, long time, where I felt I absolutely had to write something immediately. And I called a friend at the New York Times and whipped out over a couple of hour period a piece about that. And what I said in the piece was, Squirrel Hill was such a, and remains, such a perfect combination of utterly American neighborhood and utterly Jewish neighborhood at the same time, that I grew up in the lucky circumstances of never, ever questioning that there was any conflict between the pride and the comfort I felt as an American and the pride and comfort I felt as a Jew. And Tree of Life, at least for an instant, shook my faith in that. But I will say that the response of the people in Pittsburgh, from the Pittsburgh Steelers, who put out a T-shirt with their emblem altered to include a Jewish star, to all the political people, to the wonderful Muslim community in Pittsburgh, who offered not only funds but emotional support to the Jewish community. Pittsburgh is an amazingly neighborhood-focused place. In that sense, it's one of America's largest small towns. And everybody in the city came together to say no. And so in a way, it's been a kind of the foundation stones shifted a little bit, maybe, but the building is still standing.
We come to adapt to these things, you know, these shooting incidents and many varieties of domestic terrorism and other terrorism. But when it happens so close to you, did it change you?
Well, as I said, it made me briefly wonder. You know, my theory has always been that America is the last best hope of mankind on earth. And I think for Jewish Americans and many others, this is the place where they can be what they want to be and be who they are, and do so freely without fear.
But do you feel less safe because of it?
No.
Okay.
I don't. Because that faith, even though momentarily shaken, has not gone away. And I think that what the Democrats need to do is figure out a way to make it clear that respect for the individual and a sense of community that comes with the respect for the individual is the most American thing. Most American thing. And they've got to seize that idea back from a person who has, in my view, misused it and trampled on it.
Yeah, we have a minute left. Do you think the civility can be returned to the American political
Not easily,
conversation?
because not only do you have the party thing that I mentioned, we have this majoritarian idea, like they're going to, the last bits, I will tell you all that the last bits of the Newtonian clockwork that the founders put in place is in serious jeopardy. What they wanted to do was divide power and divide up the bad instincts of mankind, to fracture it in such a way that we would not consume ourselves in fear and tribalism. And it's always a challenge to fight against fear and tribalism. That's what they were trying to do, however flawed they were and hypocritical they were. But I don't know how you reassemble it. I think we're heading into new times, and the challenge is going to be to preserve the ideals of the founders in a different environment of globalism, of digital media, of environmental catastrophe. I mean, there are lots of things coming down the road that are going to test our ability to be civil. And I would also say, don't count on one person to do it. okay? It's not up to the president to do it, although the president can do a lot, because the president is sort of like the, writes the score, if you will, of the symphony. He or she decides what key it's played in, and whether it's.
And the rest of us
And
have
Trump
to.
and Donald Trump has said, "Hey, screw your basically screw it. You know, it's you.
Screw the score.
Screw the whole thing."
Yeah.
And
Play my
it
own
can't be
music.
the way we proceed.
Well, our time is up. Thank
Amazing.
you. Yeah, that's a profound ending, but yeah, I know it goes fast on this subject, doesn't it? But thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
Come, don't. Let's wait 8 years for the next time.
I'll do it anytime, Carol.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.